welcome to Tracy Mommy Reads. I am back again with another video. Today, I am going to be talking about the book Friends with Secrets by Christine Gunderson. Friends with Secrets. So let's just dive into this book and I'll talk about, what I like, what I didn't like, the usual, but then also why I feel compelled to say this is a 5-star book. First of all, let's talk about the premise. So you have two women, Nikki, who is a former news anchor. She's an exhausted and overwhelmed woman because she is the mother of 4 children, like under the age of 6. She has a newborn. She has twin daughters who are just starting kindergarten. So that makes them like 5. Then she has a 3-year-old. So yeah, she's pretty overwhelmed and like out of her mind and trying to figure out how she can go back to work ASAP because like motherhood, while she loves her kids, it's dragging her, okay? She is being drugged with the demands of motherhood to these 4 kids. She's like battling guilt because she feels like her life doesn't look like the other lives of mothers and kids at the school. They went to like a school event before school started, and one of her kids was like in a robe. The other one had marker all over his face, while everybody else was just so well put together. So Nikki is like going through it. Then you have this woman named Ainsley, because the school that their kids go to, it's like a private school with mostly well-to-do parents, right? So the other woman, Ainsley, she's married to almost billionaire who's running for governor. And she has 2 kids, right? One of them is 5 and one of them is 3. So her daughter is like, friends with Nikki's daughters, and her son, they've started doing play dates for the 2 of them. But the thing about Ainsley, she's a dark past, right? And what happens as the book kind of opens, like in the opening chapters, we find out that there is a coach who has started working at the school where their kids go. And he's someone from Ainsley's past that could just totally blow up her spot because he knows some stuff about her, right? But let's just talk about how this book started off. It was so hilarious and accurate all at the same time. It made me think about one of my favorite books, like in the humor category, is a book called People I Want to Punch in the Throat by Jen Mann. And it basically chronicles a woman who I'm sure with Jen Mann, she's a satirist and an author or whatever. And she was kind of chronicling her own experiences of, being that mother or that woman who just cannot seem to get into this whole Stepford wife like mold of moms who are, on the PTA and bringing cupcakes for the birthday and showing up first in the pickup line and, all that kind of stuff. And some of the internal and external dialogue that Nikki was having when she was in the store with her kids in that first chapter, I was literally laughing out loud. So it was a great start to the book. And the thing that I loved is that it hit so many like emotions like seamlessly. I mean, you go from having this like just laugh out loud moments to having this deep sense, especially if you're a mom. I feel like mothers at some point, you can relate to this woman's journey, especially if you have more than one child. But, you go from laughing because it's so relatable to feeling the palpable like distress that this woman is having with her body changing and everybody needing something from her and that emotional toll of not sleeping. And then we get like a little mysterious part because what's going on with Ainsley and why did she change her name, And the most beautiful part to me about the story was you have these two women who, at face value seem very, very different. And this like organic friendship that forms between the two of them, and they just were themselves. I feel like a lot of times, especially making friends as adults, when you're like a kid or a teenager in high school, you have these friendships and they kind of last the test of time. If people are lucky, you'll have friends in your life that have always known you and they've seen different versions of you, and you just continue to grow and they continue to be there or not. But making friends as an adult, when you already have so much going on, it can be challenging. It could be hard. It could be impossible in some situations, right? But the two of them, granted, their kids, is what brought them together, but then how they just became ride or die so quick. And I think one of the pivotal moments, something so simple, Nikki had gone over to Ainsley's house, which, she has like this mansion with servants and shit. So Nikki was really like, what? This is how people really live life, because even as a news anchor, like, she wasn't pulling in the kind of money that Ainsley's husband has. And anyway, they go for this play date with their kids, and Nikki gets a phone call that has her in tears, and Ainsley is just like, oh my God, what's wrong? Patting her or whatever. And then I think she just, in a moment of just sheer empathy, she tells this woman in the middle of the play date, I'm going to watch these kids. You go take a nap. Because really, she has not slept. You got a newborn that's needing all these feedings. Her husband was out of town working. Then you have these little kids who are getting up at the butt crack of dawn after you just closed your eyes. I mean, she was like, she was about to crash out. And so hesitantly, she agreed. I'm just going to close my eyes. I'm just going to take a cat nap. And I'm sorry. I'll wake me up when it's time to go pick the kids up. Honey, when she got up, Ainsley had went and got them kids. Ainsley was fixing them all something to eat, and just that in itself, something so simple, and something so plausible and real, it just endeared Ainsley to Nikki, that this woman who, for her to have such a selfless moment when most women in that situation and position will be very selfish with themselves and with their time. And I just thought that was, I just thought that was a really beautiful moment between those characters, the way that it was written. And the other thing that I really liked, even though like Ainsley's husband, was hella rich, he came from a rich family, right? But he had this thing where he felt guilty about that he hadn't really earned any of the things that he'd gotten. He just got them because of his family. So he was a do-gooder, like for real. He was not shady. He was running for governor because he really wanted to make a difference. He gave away a lot of money. He had these programs. He was helping, with all these initiatives and stuff. He was just generally a good guy. And even on Nikki's side, her husband was a, he was trying to get into the business. He made furniture, and he was really, really talented. So he would go in different places to get different kind of wood and get craftsmen that could come help him or whatever. And he, was like, hey, things are falling apart, but we got each other type man, So I really liked the dynamic of the relationships that they had. Nobody was like being cheated on. Nobody was abusive. The guys were like, we got the kids, y'all go do your thing or whatever. And which is how it should be. There was this one quote where Nikki was like telling her husband, she was like, well, I'm going to call my sister, if you need a break or whatever. And he was like, these are my kids. I'm not the babysitter. I got it. And I think a lot of times that kind of narrative is what people put out there about fathers. Like they can't, quote unquote, watch their own kids. Like, like they need help, but who helps the mom? So for him to step up and, just for the author to have that dialogue in her book. I really thought that was pretty cool. And then you get on that mystery part, after Ainsley and Nikki started confiding in each other, and she tells, Nikki's the only person outside of Ainsley's sister that knows who she really is, where she came from, and all that stuff. And they started working together because Nikki didn't like the coach anyway. So he's a threat to you, say less. Tell me what we need to do, and we can get rid of this dude, So they went on this side quest, and with Nikki's investigative skills and Ainsley's contacts to try to get rid of this guy because of who he was and the threat maybe that he posed to Ainsley. So that whole thing, how they were both just in it to win it. There was like never any. I mean, there were some moments of like, oh, should we be doing this? Like, what if we get caught? But then it was like, fuck it, we're already here. Let's go. So it was just so many elements that I loved about this book from start to finish. I mean, the writing, the dialogue, the characters, you even saw growth, once we got to the very end, from how scattered, Nikki was, and Ainsley learned to stop being so, she had like little guidelines and little things, and she was so organized. And it all had to do, ironically enough, for both of them with the way they were raised and who their mothers were. So it just was so much packed into this book. And it was only like, it was an average book, I think 300 something pages, but none of it was preachy. None of it was like, okay, she's doing the most. It just was seamless and a part of the story and a part of their journeys. And, it was a believable timeline. Things were plausible. I know I'm gushing about it, but it was just such an enjoyable read. Yeah, so when I think about what I didn't like, oh my God. I mean, you had heroes to root for, villains you wanted to see, bad things happen to. If I had to say anything, and this is what I dislike, this is a trigger warning, and it may be a slight spoiler, right? I didn't like the fact that a predator in the book was preying on young girls, like anywhere from 14 to 17. And I know that is reality. There are some sick ass human beings out there. But I felt for the purposes of this book, because he was involved with college athletics, like they could have left it there. Like if he had to be a damn predator, I mean, he was already older. He was already in a what do you call it? Like not leadership, but like he was already in a position where he was over these young women or whatever. So even if they were 19 or 20, it still would have been like, yuck, because you're supposed to be someone that's guiding them and that they are supposed to trust, and you're, doing all this creepy shit. But I don't know that I liked, I guess that was to make him really somebody you didn't care if he lived or died, right? Because he was just that diabolical. But I guess it just hits too close to home for me when I have a daughter in that age range. Like whenever I read books that may have something like that going on with that age demographic. And even in this book, the couple of the girls that things were happening to, they were very much like, oh yeah, like, oh, we like it, and oh yeah, he's our sugar daddy, and they, because their frontal lobes aren't even fully formed, but they didn't realize they were even, victims or whatever. So, I mean, I guess in like if you had to go to opposite end where these girls were really traumatized because they, were victimized in a way that they totally didn't want that, and they couldn't fight back, and they felt so hopeless. And either way of the end of the spectrum is disgusting. But I guess when you're writing stories like that, to try to make it more palatable or whatever, if you can. But yeah, that's the only thing I didn't like. That is also a trigger warning, serves as your trigger warning. And again, maybe a slight spoiler, but all in all, it was just a great escape. You know, the main characters were likable. Like I said, they showed growth. You even had side characters. I mean, there were some of the little bitchy moms at the school, but that's par for the course. I think what the main takeaway for me is that when you truly allow people to be themselves without a lot of judgment, you know, and allow them to do the same for you, you can maybe truly find some incredible relationships, whether that's romantic or you know, just platonic or friendships or whatever. I think like putting aside all this judgment and creating narratives in your head about what you think somebody is like because of where they live or how much money they have, you know, without really getting to know them. You know, I think maybe you're missing out on some potential incredible relationships, you know, in that regard. Anyway, I could go on, right? But I'm gonna stop there. And like I said in my the video that I did about the girl on the train, the movie, I feel like for as much as I'm like always, you know, like, oh, I could see this being a movie or I could see this being a, there are some things that it probably could be a movie, doesn't mean it should be. And for as much as I love this book, I don't think I would want to see it ruined by becoming a movie, because I think I would want to keep my feelings and my memories and what I envisioned for this book and not have it tainted by having it brought to screen and potentially not being adapted very well. So even if I don't know that this book is being, optioned for television or film, which if it is, kudos to the author. Get your coins. I always say that, but I don't know that I would watch it. Because, you know, like I said, it was such a great read, and I'm good on that, right? I'm good on what I have in my mind and how I felt about it. So yeah, Friends with Secrets by Christine Gunderson. If you have read this, what did y'all think about it? Am I, per usual, doing too much? Or did you just think it was okay? And if you didn't really like it, I would love to know why in the comments. Let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure that you like this video and go ahead and take the opportunity to subscribe to my channel if you have not done so already. And to those of you that have subscribed, thank you, thank you, thank you. I sincerely appreciate it. You guys enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you next week. Bye.